I am a dead man. I would like to think of myself as a reasonable, level-headed individual, and that is exactly why I know that there is no happy ending for me by any measure whatsoever. I have only one thing left I can do. Whether it works or not, this document is to serve as my last will and testament. I will not try to diminish my responsibility in what happened, but before I die the blame will be placed squarely on the heads of those who deserve it. It was the combined hubris of two men that sealed our fates, Dr. Chappelle and Dr. Volstak, the men who found God. It all started when I transferred to the postgraduate studies program at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. I had a shiny, new bachelor's in psychology and was looking forward to further exploring the nooks and crannies of the human mind. A friend I had graduated would put me in contact with a new colleague of his named Dr. Anders Volstak, who was looking for psychology and biology students to aid in a series of experiments that he was to conduct at the university. Volstak was a young psychologist from Norway. He was a generally pleasant man. He was respectful to most, very punctual and polite. But the good doctor had his demons just as everyone does. He grew up in a very hostile environment. His parents were far-right, ultra-nationalists. They lived in a makeshift community in the woods with others who believed similarly. He and the other children were subject to severe beatings, bleach baths, and branding any time they dared question any of their elders' beliefs. It was during one such instance when Anders' 9-year-old brother was beaten into a coma by their father for not kneeling low enough before the cross. Anders remembered it very clearly. Each time the axe handle came down his father would scream, "Urdu scam Christi, Urdu scam Christi." He was asking the boy if he was ashamed of Christ. Whether he was or not, he never woke up. Anders was able to run away with several other children one night. He was taken in by a boys' home right across the border in Sweden, and that is where he began his education. He then traveled to the States to pursue his post-secondary, first at the University of Alabama, then Kentucky. It was in the bluegrass state where Anders met Dr. Dominic Chappelle for the first time. From then on we were all living on borrowed time. The doctors had discovered the God cluster as it became known in the scientific community. They had established a physical location in the brain where these abstract beliefs are likely formed and enforced. What would be the next question they had to answer? Chappelle was still curious about how this feature had developed over the hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. Unfortunately, there was no way to examine early human brain development, so Chappelle posited another idea. An idea that involved subjects that shared almost 99% of their DNA with humans but were significantly less developed psychologically, pan-troglodytes, the common chimpanzee. While still a far cry from humans, chimps are the closest living relatives that we have in the animal kingdom, having only split from the human branch 4 to 6 million years ago. There were obviously concerns, mostly put to voice by Volstak, who argued that the chimps do not have the mental capacity to comprehend concepts like gods or legends, let alone assign these properties to anything. Chappelle had a way of talking people into things though, and Volstak had the utmost respect for him, so it was decided that some preliminary studies would be done with more in-depth experiments likely in the future. This is when Volstak began looking for assistants to conduct these experiments. This is when my friend told me about the new position. This is when I decided it would be an excellent opportunity. Forgive me. They wanted to use veteran lab chimps. They were significantly less hostile than those fresh from the wild, and while chimps may not look physically imposing, they are almost solid muscle and have the utmost potential for violence. An average adult male chimp is easily 5 times as strong as his human counterpart. I'd heard horror stories about chimps going berserk, ripping people's limbs off, chewing their faces to pulp, and even kidnapping and eating human infants, all of which are behaviors one would rather not see up close in a confined area. Lab chimps, in comparison, are amazingly docile even while being poked, prodded, injected, and who knows what else. Another unusual advantage of using lab chimps is that some of them have been taught sign language and a few of them have pretty impressive vocabularies. They have been shown to understand concepts such as love, hate, and sympathy. Volstak was taken aback by their intelligence. The more he watched them socialize, play, and solve puzzles, the more he wanted to carry on with further experiments. Chimps are also one of the few animals to have passed the mirror test, thus already displaying some sense of self-awareness, and they are able to function together in groups like tribes or clans while using a strict hierarchical social system, very similar to behaviors displayed by early humans. The chimpanzees seemed so close, so where was that gap, that piece of the puzzle that we had but they didn't? The pre-experimental interviews were conducted the next day. Each chimp seemed in good health. Dr. Gamble spoke with each of them, signed with each of them, and since she was the only one among us that was familiar with the language, we could just watch and wait for her to fill us in after the interview. She asked them all the same questions. What is your name? What is my name? Do you feel good or bad? All three, Lou, Bongo, and Simon answered the questions, and all were given chopped fruit. The chimps were a lot bigger in person than I had imagined, close to 5.5 feet tall and weighing in around 150 pounds. These were not small animals by any measure. Simon especially, he was larger than the other two, but he was also the most talkative. He asked Dr. Gamble for chocolate during their interview. She told him she would bring him some later, and he began hooting and laughing. It was surreal to be around something so close to human that you feel a certain kinship, yet just animal enough to convince you it's not a human. Where Bongo? Where Bongo? That's what Simon was asking now. The chimps were never in a communal enclosure. They were always separate. They shouldn't have even known other chimps were involved, let alone their names. Volstak and Chappelle were expressionless. I don't know what they were thinking at this point. Hell, I'm not even sure what I was thinking. We barely even had time to look at each other before Simon started tapping on his window. We're brother. Gamble stomped back into the room and vehemently started signing. Simon no have brother. Simon no have brother. Then he signed something different. Pen. Simon had been a part of labs that allowed the chimps to work with various artistic tools, so it was not unusual for him to know how to ask for a pen. Gamble came out, grabbed a pen from a desk, and then went back in. When she gave the pen to Simon, he immediately ran to the wall and started marking on it. It looked like he was trying to write words, but the characters were malformed or seemingly invented on the spot. He had filled half the wall with these incoherent markings before he abruptly stopped. If it wasn't surreal enough, the chimp's entire demeanor changed in an instant. He stood up straight, turned to his beloved corner, kneeled, and began signing the same thing over and over again. Dig love Simon. Dig love Simon. Poor Bongo's body was carted away to be disposed of somewhere. I had to wait there until a few guys came to get him. The others had long left without saying a word to one another, and since I was the student, I automatically drew the short straw. I couldn't stay in the lab. The air in there gets heavier every day. Volstak and Chappelle are resolved to keep going until... I'm not really sure what their end game is at this point. They seem to have proven their theory about the God cluster. They have made Simon a believer of something. After they had carted the body out, I walked back in to make sure the lights were all shut off and everything was in order. Reluctantly, I walked over to the enclosures. Lou was asleep in his lean-to. Bongo's was bare except for a big, red patch in the middle of the floor, and Simon was standing at his door. I looked past him at the wall he had marked up. I don't know what made me do it, but I slipped out my iPhone and snapped a picture of the wall. Simon was just staring at me, not blinking. He slowly began to bare his teeth. I left. I should have just kept going, never came back. It probably wouldn't save me, but at least I would have a head start. There it is, the tapping at the door, steady, growing. Simon is here.